Hello, examiners, and welcome to this webinar for virtual exam setup. Today, I'll be presenting on how to prepare for a great exam to ensure you're leading a professional and respectful exam. Over the course of the next few minutes, I will highlight how to prepare for your exam space, lighting to ensure that you're well seen by the candidate, where to place your webcam, how to reduce distractions for the candidate, how to create physical proximity to the candidate by displaying active listening, and lastly, exam attire. Let's get into it. When preparing your exam space, think location, location, location. Ideally, you want to complete the exam from a room that has a door that can be closed and that reduces noise and enhances privacy, and also reduces the likelihood of another person walking through your back. Ideally, you want to set yourself up so that the door is not in your background. Remember, you cannot blur your background or use a virtual background in the exam delivery platform. Whatever you see in your background, the candidate will also see. If you do not have access to a room with a door, ensure that you have a wall behind you so that no one will accidentally walk through behind you. You want to make sure that no one's ever in your background at any point in time. Whenever you're considering where to have the exam, also think of background noise. So if you can hear the TV or radio from the room you're in, if another person is using one of those devices, chances are that the candidate will too. Ensure that the people in your home know that the space needs to be quiet on exam day and not to disturb you. Ensure that you're set up at a desk or table. Completing the exam from a couch doesn't really create the professional atmosphere that we're looking to. Remember, this is a big day for the candidates. Your location should reflect this. Before the big day, take a look around your exam location and make sure it's tidy. You want to remove any clutter that's behind you so that there's no visual distractions. Think of things like mirrors, big posters, pictures, large sculptures, or even patient material if your exam location doubles as an office. Now that you have your location all set up, make sure it's comfortable. You're in this room for quite a while, so have all the items that you need to be comfortable within reach. Regardless of how many exams you've done, you always want to double check your IT and your IT setup using our IT setup document. This includes completing the speed test and Amazon Chime test as we regularly complete updates to the exam delivery platform. You will also need a wired headset. As pictured here, there is an optimal type of headset which has a mic close to your mouth and a headset that fits comfortably over your ears. The headset will reduce background noise on your end, concentrate your voice so that it's easily heard by the candidate, and also allow you to better hear the candidate. Many of our senior examiners have found it helpful to have important resources printed. You have a suite of resources available to you that you can print in advance of the exam from the examiner's SharePoint site. However, be reminded that these materials must be kept confidential. Another pro tip is to use your phone, the timer app, or a separate stopwatch so that you can time the candidate as they progress through the exam. And another pro tip that I'll share from your examiner colleagues are sticky notes. These are really important to jot down important reminders. Some common reminders that examiners have shared they use on their sticky note is a reminder to mute and unmute. The sticky note is also dual purpose, as you can use it to cover your webcam lens when you're in the virtual waiting room and waiting for the exam to start. All right, let's move on to lighting. Your candidate wants to see you. The light source should be front-facing, so in front of you rather than behind you. Notice the picture on the left. This gentleman has a window behind him and it's creating dark shadows on his face. On the right, he's using a front-facing lamp or ring light, and you can really clearly see his features. Let's look at some more examples. So here's an example of backlight, so a light from behind creating shadows on the front of the face. Note, if you're using a light source that's natural, so a window, it might increase or decrease in intensity throughout the day depending on the season. So have an artificial light source like a lamp, maybe in addition to your overhead light, to ensure that the candidate can clearly see you regardless if you're in the morning session or the afternoon session. In the next photo, we have just an overhead light. You can see that there's some shadows kind of pointing downward on the face. Next, we have a very intense front-facing light. So consider this as like sitting in front of a window on a bright sunny day. Too much light can also make it impossible to see your features, as well as hurt your eyes and not make it a very comfortable exam experience for you. Lastly, I'll show you what the optimal lighting setup looks like. This is a front-facing light. It could also have an overhead light too. What it does is it makes it really easy to see your face, your features, you're brightly lit, and it's an even light with no excessive shadowing. So we have our location, it's private, it's tidy, it's quiet. We have our lighting so that the candidate can see us. Now we need to make sure that we're in frame. So you will either have a webcam that's built into your laptop or desktop computer, and this is usually at the center of the top of your screen, or you'll have an external camera, which allows you to move your cameras around to different locations. Angles matter when attempting to mimic our in-person interactions. You would never have an in-person meeting where you looked away from the other person the whole time or looked down the entire time. So we don't want to do that with our virtual interactions either. Your camera should always point slightly down or at eye level. The image on the left shows an upward facing angle, so the camera is positioned below. The image on the right is more at eye level. However, notice the eyes, they are looking down slightly. In addition to the angle of the camera, it's also important to every once in a while look into the actual camera lens. This will look like you're looking into the eyes of the candidate, whereas if you're looking down at the screen, it will look like you're looking slightly down. You don't have to look up at your camera lens the entire time, just every once in a while. It's really helpful to build that connection. If you're using two screens, make sure your camera is angled so that you're not only seeing your side profile. In terms of distance from your camera, your face and shoulders should be in frame. Now, for distance, you don't want the camera to be too close from below. You also don't want to be too low in the frame and just be a tiny floating head. Or you don't want to be out of frame. See the difference that it makes from the left versus the right, from being partially out of frame to being fully in frame? Additionally, I'll point out that you want to make sure, in addition to not having people in your background, you also don't want to have your animals in your background, as they can be distracting to the candidate. Speaking of distractions, I talked about the sticky notes earlier, how they're great to hide your camera while you're waiting for the exam to start. Remember, you cannot turn off your camera in the exam delivery platform. So some devices may also have a slider that you can use to cover your webcam, but a sticky note will do in a pinch as well. Next, in terms of reducing distractions for the candidates, this is where headsets are also really important. We talked about how headsets must be wired, so plugged into your laptop, and how important they are for reducing background noise, making it easy for the candidate to hear you and for you to hear the candidate. If everyone in the call is wearing a headset, there will be no echoes as long as the headset is properly plugged into the computer. Another tip to reduce distractions for the candidate is to get into the habit of muting whenever you're not talking. You can practice using the mute and unmute button in the exam demo site. This will make sure that the candidate doesn't hear any distracting noises from your mic, like swallowing water if you need to take a drink during the exam, or clearing your throat or coughing. I've talked about how to use lighting as well as webcam angles to create a sense of closeness and rapport and eye contact with the candidate. Even through this virtual exam, we want to use body language to tell the candidate, I am listening, I am engaged, I am hearing you. This includes staying in frame and looking to the camera lens every once in a while. You can always lean forward into the camera to display active listening versus leaning back, which may withdraw you from the conversation or make you look a little bit distracted. You can also consider using natural and neutral movement to let the candidate know you're listening and also not frozen. This could be small nods at specific moments in time, or some mild head tilting, or even using hand gestures if that's how you typically talk. Lastly, let's talk about attire, the age-old question of what to wear. This is a high-stakes exam. For our candidates, this is one of the last steps on a long road to becoming a registered PT. Your attire should represent the importance of the exam and demonstrate professionalism. Consider business casual items like polos, plain tees, plain long sleeve shirts, or even more practical items like scrubs. Remember, the candidate's only seeing your upper body. You should avoid wardrobe choices that could be distracting to the candidate, such as shirts with large logos or graphics. We also recommend avoiding busy patterns or clothing with lots of repeating lines. Items like this could easily be distorted depending on your camera resolution, and they create a visual distraction for the candidate during the exam. Lastly, you'll want to consider any accessories you're wearing, like bracelets, earrings, or necklaces, or even watches. Specifically, you don't want accessories that when you move that will make noises, hit against your mic, or jingle during the exam. Thank you for completing this webinar. I hope you found this information helpful. Please do contact the exams team if you have any further questions, and we'll see you at the next exam.